It's another primary week as multiple races played out across a number of states, and progressive Democrats suffered a considerable loss in New York after Congressman Jamal Bowman was defeated in a landslide race against moderate Democrat George Latimer.
Our opponents, not opponent, may have won this round at this time in this place, but this will be a battle for our humanity and justice for the rest of our lives.
Tonight we turn page and we say that we believe in inclusion of everybody in our representation. That you are included no matter what your demographic is.
It was the most expensive primary race to date, with almost $25 million being spent across the district. Voters shifted away from squad member Jamal Bowman following the controversy surrounding the congressman after his criticism of Israel, and Trump's endorsement power was also tested, this time not having the success it's seen this past cycle. Here to go on the record is Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science from Decision Desk HQ. Scott, as always, thanks for joining me. You know, this was a major blow to progressives. Bowman lost by 17 points. How much of a role did AIPAC's spending play in this race? And do you think this divide seen in the Democratic Party in this particular district will impact the general election, or will we see it blown up in the general election?
Well, so look, I know Congressman Bowman likes to blame AIPAC, and look, they spent a lot of money in here, but I think redistricting had a play in this, as well as low turnout, and honestly, the congressman's stances and positions over his term in Congress. All those factors played into his 17-point loss last night. I mean, look, at the end of the day, money matters, but these candidates, these voters, it was a relatively low turnout. They knew what they were coming out for, and they already had an opinion whether or not there was ads in front of their face or not. Now, whether this is going to have an impact down the road, probably not on the general election. This is going to be a safe Democratic seat. It's not going to really be up for control of the House. We have Cori Bush, another squad member's primary, coming up later this summer. She's got a pretty serious challenger, and we'll see if the squad's able to hold on in another potentially close primary.
You know, I want to stick with this race in particular because we saw that Hillary Clinton endorsed George Latimer, Bernie Sanders endorsed Jamal Bowman. So there's clearly a divide within the party, even when you look at it from a 30,000-foot view. So does this impact Joe Biden at all? Not in terms of the district itself, but in terms of Democrat enthusiasm? I mean, is there a frustration maybe among progressives after this race?
Yeah, no, certainly. Look, Jamal Bowman, very popular among the progressive wing and the Democrats, able to raise a lot of money, as you pointed out, $25 million. That wasn't all one-sided. His side and the progressives raised a lot of money as well. It certainly does not help shore up Joe Biden's base. It's funny you noted, or it's good you noted that, Bernie and Hillary Clinton, those are good placeholders for maybe the two wings of the Democratic Party. No, Joe Biden stayed far away from this race. I think Biden in his presidency would like these things to go away and just could be on the primary and focus going forward. But by and large, yeah, this is going to be a thing in the primaries and the remaining primaries we have for the season, and something the Biden campaign is going to have to address in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan, where he's going to need to shore up some of these progressive voters. He's going to have to excite them to come out.
I want to move out west to Colorado and look at some Republican primaries. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert swept her primary challenge after switching to a new district, which is solidly Republican. Scott, can she put sort of the drama that surrounded her in the past behind her? I mean, this seems like it's a pretty safe district for her going into the general election.
Yeah, it's a very safe district. She sits on the House Natural Resources Committee. It's not reported as much, but she's done a pretty good job about getting in the news locally about the things that she's supporting in Congress, even though Congress isn't really passing a whole lot. She is certainly trying to get into a safe district and kind of change her image back at home from the firebrand, I'm in the news all the time type of congresswoman to, no, I'm here to get things done. This was a closely watched primary. It was expected after she moved that she would have a little bit of a tougher time. So I'm a little bit surprised to see her win by this much. But, this is her attempt to change her image a little bit so that she doesn't become another Madison Cawthorn.
Local news absolutely matters when you're paying attention to national politics. So thanks for bringing that up. So moving on to former President Trump, his endorsement power this cycle has so far been unmatched, but that was up until this week. The former president's influence didn't secure victories for Trent Staggs, who's running for Senator Mitt Romney's seat in Utah, and in South Carolina for Mark Burns, who lost the primary race against Sherry Biggs in the state's 3rd congressional district. Scott, do you think this spells trouble for candidates hoping to run on Trump's endorsement, or is this simply a blip in the road?
Look, I don't. I was commenting earlier. It's like, this is the Trump endorsement. You want it. All things being equal, you want a Trump endorsement, but no one should look at it as, man, if I get the Trump endorsement, I might as well walk in and start measuring the curtains in my office. That's not how this goes. As you pointed out, these are 2 races where the Trump endorsed opponent candidate didn't win. You know, we can point back to the 2022 cycle in Nebraska with a couple of candidates, as well as Ohio and again in South Carolina. So long story short, look, the Trump endorsement's important, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're invincible. And I expect his endorsement, you know, we've got a few more primaries coming up in places like Missouri and Florida later this summer. You know, his endorsed candidates are going to do very well, but I don't know that all of them are going to make it across the line either. You know, his record's going to be good, but it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, when we're talking about the power of the Trump endorsement this cycle, we're talking about primaries. We'll remember in 2022, Trump's endorsement was not enough to get a number of Republicans in various states across the finish line in the general election. So turning to a new AP NORC poll that is showing most adults are planning to follow coverage of the presidential debate between President Biden and President Trump. Scott, how much will this debate's early start date before the convention, before either of these 2 men are officially their party's nominees, impact the race? Democrats say a lot of it has to do with early voting.
Yeah, look, when this was announced, I think you and I were talking about a little bit. This was one of the earliest presidential debates, at least in the last 20 or 30 years, probably longer than that. You know, we'll have to see what the TV numbers are. I mean, if we see 80, 90, 100 million Americans watch it, I could theoretically see it move numbers, especially if one candidate does better than the other. But I wouldn't be surprised to see one of the lower rated debates. And as long as neither candidate has a big major gaffe or something like that, the polling numbers to stay pretty steady going forward. I think this is an interesting strategy by both campaigns to try and get an early debate out and maybe get a foothold. But, you know, short of any major event happening, I think we could be waking up a week later saying, that was an interesting, fun thing to watch, but the polls haven't really moved a lot.
Speaking of numbers and data, I want to turn our attention to new Decision Desk forecasting numbers. Former President Trump has a 58% chance of winning in November, a 2% jump. Scott, what's behind that impact, and what's behind that number, and what has impacted this gain?
So the big thing there, and again, 58% chance, slight advantage for Donald Trump there, but still a very much a coin flip. It's really the post-conviction stabilization of polling. So let me unpack that. Basically speaking, in these key battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, post-conviction, the numbers for Trump have not moved a whole lot, and in some cases they've moved a point or two towards him. And so that's kind of why we see the 58%, which is roughly where it opened up when we started tracking this about a month ago. Again, big news event, lots of coverage, and we've had quite a few polls, over 24 polls in battleground states since the conviction, and not a whole lot of movement.
We know that most Democrats and Republicans know who they're going to vote for. You know, they've seen the Trump and Biden show. They're set in stone. But there's some independent swing voters who are on the fence, and they're going to ultimately decide this election. How have these swing voters nationwide reacted to Trump's guilty verdict?
So the polling is somewhat mixed in the sense that, by and large, the polling shows that independent voters, and all depends on how you ask the question, I guess, don't like that Trump was convicted, and they say this is a factor in them potentially voting against him or not turning out at all. And I think that's the key distinction here. No one likes no swing voter likes a candidate who's convicted, whether or not you think it was a sham trial or not. These independent voters look at it and say, well, that's not necessarily a good thing. The question is it going to force them to vote for, or, encourage them to vote for Donald Trump, or is it going to make them stay home and say, look, I don't like either of these guys, so I'm not going to do it? And I think that's really where the question is. But the polling's pretty clear they don't like it. But the polling is a little bit mixed in terms of whether it's going to motivate them to vote for Biden or not come out at all.
Scott, I want to turn our attention to some fundraising figures. Trump's campaign and the Republican National Committee raised a massive $141 million in May. That's compared to $85 million for the Biden campaign. How much of that was from first-time donors? And is this seen as Republicans supporting Trump after his felony conviction?
So yeah, let's address both those points. It was a record brand new donor month for the RNC, and let's define what a brand new donor is. It's someone who has not given this cycle. So they may have given in previous cycles, they may have given in 2020, but they have yet to give this cycle. So that's big for them, right? So they've had some very bad fundraising months in the previous, and it's mostly because they haven't had the same donors come out in the past come out this cycle. And so it looks like post conviction they were able to get those new donors out there. And two, from a total fundraising standpoint, this was very good. And this is very good in terms of helping the RNC and the Trump campaign keep up in spending. They've got to make some investments now, not later this fall, investments now in field programs, TV reservations, data programs, all those types of things. We'll be able to see if they're able to keep up this trend over the next couple of months. I think we're going to see both camps see a big fundraising month around the debate, but we're going to see who's going to have a bigger one. But yeah, no, this was those May numbers were very good for the Trump campaign after having a couple of rough months prior.
We'll be looking out for those fundraising and polling numbers and also new decision desk data following the debate. Scott Tranter, as always, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
That's it for What's America Thinking. I'm Julia Manchester. Come back next week. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel.